Passing North Point is officially recognised as the end of an Atlantic crossing. However, it's about 5 miles from North Point to Port St Charles, which was the actual end of my journey. On a calm day in the lee of the island, this would be a pretty simple row. However, with the wind blowing at a solid 25 knots, it was never going to be easy. But that was the last thing on my mind as I approached the official finishing line. Cheryl, Tony and the girls came out to meet me at North Point. You can see the swell was quite heavy.
There he is!
And this is my first sight of them. It's obviously really challenging for Cheryl with a camera on the boat, but it gives her a cool perspective of how tiny the rowing boat is in the ocean and surrounded by the swell.
Yeah, he's in his yellow shirt, I think.
He's bareback, he doesn't have a shirt on.
Oh, wait! He's wearing his Australian hat.
So I've stopped here right on my waypoint with no deviation whatsoever. So I was quite proud of that.
Nice shorts.
So this is where it all gets a little bit challenging. I've passed North Point and my waypoint, which is officially finishing crossing the Atlantic. I remember standing up and screaming at the top of my voice, I've rowed across an ocean. Nobody could hear me, obviously. I was obviously excited to see everybody in the boat. There was a quick exchange of hellos, but it's quite difficult then because you have to kind of ignore everybody and just sit back down and keep rowing. Just around the corner from where we are now, there are two massive big rocks in the water that are just submerged, so they were kind of critical to miss. At this point I've still kind of got the wind behind me, so I'm not doing too bad. The chop's a real mess though, and it's very difficult to get the blades in the water, both at the time impossible, and because the boat rocks from side to side and yaws, it's even difficult to get any real power on just one oar stroke. I also think at this stage I've had a little bit of an adrenaline rush at the finish when I said hello to everybody, and I'm now trying to get my head round getting to the actual finish and stepping off the boat. Here you can see how close we are to the actual shore. It doesn't seem that far, but the end of Barbados is very flat, and the wind that's blown me all the way across the Atlantic at 25 or 30 knots is just skimming across that very shallow headland. As I round the corner and hug the coast, I'm also starting to take on more south in my course. This means the easterly wind's starting to cut across the boat. Still moving along okay though, and happy with my progress. You can see from the flags on the mast, the wind is starting to move beam onto the boat. Made some good progress though, and started to move out of that really choppy swell around the top end of North Point. Here the guys on the boat have actually got between me and the shoreline, and this is to keep me away from those rocks. While the swell's more manageable now, the wind is still just as strong as it has been all morning, and again you can see from the flags on the mast that it's now completely beam onto the boat. Unfortunately for me, that means that although I think I'm rowing in a straight line parallel to the shore, I'm actually tracking across the water and being pushed out to sea. Once those flags have gone past 90 degrees across the boat, I know I'm in trouble then because the wind's starting to come from the front of the boat. It's also on the port front quarter of the boat as well, which is obviously trying to then steer me out to sea even further. I've now got blown well off my track to Port St Charles, and I've got little option but to head back into shore. I'm getting pushed further and further offshore, and I have to turn straight into the wind. And you can see here with the flags, they're pointing straight to the back of the boat. This is where it really started to go wrong. I hadn't had a break for 5 or 6 hours other than that brief stop at North Point. I'd run out of water and snacks on deck, so I hadn't eaten for a while, and I spent 3 hours in this one spot. If I paused even for a second, the boat would just go screaming backward. In the end, frustrated and absolutely exhausted, I had to agree to be towed for about 150-200 yards just to get me back in close enough to the shore. I rode on here a bit and I'm in much calmer water, so a bit happier. I've still got a really quite difficult wind to handle though, so I'm now really starting to think it's all over bar the shouting. To get close enough into shore to avoid the worst of the wind, you can see that's put me in the middle of all the local fishing boats. Obviously in a rowing boat I'm going backwards, can't see where I'm going. I'm obviously doing my best to navigate through them, but tired, exhausted, frustrated. It was just one last nightmare. It just had to go wrong again, and absolutely it did. You can see here that I got caught up in a buoy wrapped around my rudder. The only solution to that eventually was to head out the side of the boat, swim around the back and release it. The only good thing about this was I got a cool down in the water and felt a bit better when I got back on the boat. So off we go again, clear of all the boats and hopefully no more disasters. So I'm heading here for the harbour entrance where I have to round the top corner and then head back on myself. So I'm trying here to give the corner plenty of room, as I know the wind's going to be a bit tricky and change directions. I'm really struggling with the steering system though. Out at sea it's not a major problem if you go 20 feet one way or 50 feet the other. Obviously around boats and harbours it's much more of a challenge. As around the harbour entrance you can see the flags on the boat, the wind's starting to push from my starboard side. I'm really starting to feel it here. You can see in my face in this next little section after 9 or 10 hours or whatever it is of rowing. I'm absolutely exhausted. I start drifting towards the boat on this corner. Trying to put the rudder on just lets the wind get hold of the boat, push it towards the jetty. So I extricate myself from this little mess, and that wind's still pushing me towards the jetty. One final indignity, there's a massive big concrete pier just behind me there, and I just can't get the boat to turn away from it. Even with full rudder on and yanking on that port oar, it has no impact whatsoever. The only thing I can say here is that ocean rowing boats are made for open ocean and not for harbours. They're a nightmare. It's like turning an oil tanker in a small space. You can't see where you're going. People shouting at you saying left, right, port, starboard. Drive you crazy. After rowing 3,000 miles across the Atlantic and feeling like I really knew what I was doing, not being able to just cruise up to the dock was a major embarrassment. If I hadn't been on my best behaviour, I'm sure there would have been more than a bit of bad language. So I eventually get out of this little mess, and then the next thing is to, and I really can't afford to go wrong here, is to avoid the $100 million super yacht in the harbour. Not sure if that was a welcome to the harbour or watch out and don't run into me.
November 23rd. What?
He's been on that boat since November
54 days.
23rd.
Yeah.
3 days.
Don't hug him until he's had a shower.
So after a shower and a long afternoon talking nonsense, all that was left to do was to move the boat to its permanent dock where we were staying. At this time I'm not very far away from having what ended up being probably the best night's sleep I can ever remember in my entire life. Clean sheets, soft bed, no rocking, no waves coming over the back of the boat, no thunderstorms, peace and quiet.